It's that time of the year again. The weather outside is terrible, you're scrambling to come up with a Valentine's Day gift for your significant other, and for 5 hours on Sunday, everyone pretends to be excited about watching commercials for some reason. Yes, it's Super Bowl Sunday, and what a perfect time to revisit the 16-bit classic Mutant League Football for the Sega Genesis. Mutant League Football was developed and published by Electronic Arts in 1993 for the Sega Genesis. If you've never heard of it, try to imagine playing a 16-bit Madden game, but if it was in some sort of post-apocalyptic wasteland. The story goes, and this is according directly to the manual, the origins of Mutant League are shrouded in the mists of time. The madness of thermonuclear destruction, the planet-wide upheaval of alien invasion, the eeriness of restless corpses bursting from the grave, and a sloppy filing system set up by some temp. What records still exist have been altered by haphazard scribes, sly propagandists, and what appears to be barbecue sauce. Mutant League Football featured mutants, aliens, and robots fighting alongside each other in one of the most violent arcade-style football games that I'm aware of. You take control of any of 16 separate teams, each with wacky parody names such as the Psycho Slashers, Turbo Techies, or the Slay City Slayers. Most of the names had some sort of loose NFL counterpart, such as the Midway Monsters referencing the Chicago Bears, and the Killer Convicts were a dubious nod to the Dallas Cowboys and the fact that nearly half of their team at the time had probably served at least one jail sentence during their career. To go with the team names, there were players with loose NFL references as well, such as Joe Magician for Joe Montana, Scary Ice for Jerry Rice, and the most memorable probably being Bones Jackson for Bo Jackson. Bones Jackson was a ridiculously overpowered skeleton running back that played for the Midway Monsters, who you surely would want on your team. Like Bo Jackson, Bones Jackson was even a two-sport athlete, appearing in Mutant League Hockey as well. On the surface, Mutant League Football played like any other Madden football game at the time. You could utilize run or pass plays as well as optimize your defensive alignment for whatever the situation warrants. But then you get these oddball plays like bribe ref. Yeah, you can just bribe the ref if you want to, and then he'll start calling nonsense penalties on the other team like a 5-yard penalty for littering. And of course, if you notice the other team is getting too many calls in their favor, you can call an audible and simply kill the ref if you want to. In fact, there's all sorts of crazy audibles that you can run to give the player super speed, invisibility, electrocute, or even a skunk play where your player has lethal farts. You only get a handful of these audibles to use per quarter though, so players could employ some strategy to how they're used. Adding to the unorthodox gameplay was a series of out-of-this-world playing surfaces. Slippery ice fields, fields filled with rocks, fireballs, and exploding landmines, and asteroids where you can literally just run off the sides and fall into space. It's fun just playing through all of these to see what the developers came up with. Don't like the halftime entertainment? Throw an exploding football at them. You can also play through a playoff mode where if you win, the other team simultaneously explodes. Between downs, players throw all sorts of explicit and hilarious taunts at each other. Maybe if I mention my physical perfection in my next personals ad, I might score again. Whoa, hey now. And your coach is there every step of the way to motivate you. If you keep up the great teamwork, you can skip the team meeting after the game and tamper with brakes in the parking lot. Wow, really? The violence is off the charts as well, to the point that you can even kill players on the other team. Every play typically ends in a bloody dog pile of human wreckage. It was technically possible to defeat your opponent by forfeit if too many players on the other team died, meaning even if you were losing by 50, there was still a reason to keep playing and trying to take out the other team's players. In a time when football games were trying to go for simulation and realism, Mutant League Football is all about humor and just having fun. Although single-player mode is pretty fun in its own right, the game is definitely best served in two-player mode with a group of friends some Friday night. Mutant League Football could have been a train wreck, a haphazard side project thrown together at the last minute to lure in some casual gamers. However, it's actually a very well-polished football game that just happens to have some incredibly over-the-top zany elements to it. This makes the game rather unique among a landscape of other sports games that were trying very hard to mimic real life. It's long been a common belief among fans fans of the game that it used the same graphics engine as Madden 93. However, in the book The Minds Behind the Games, Mutant League Football's lead programmer Michael Mendheim recalls that the game's engine was actually built entirely from scratch. Mendheim also recounted his story of how he got in the video game business. It didn't start out the way you'd think. He initially got his start as a graphic designer, but he was convinced to enter the video game business by Atari coin-op president Joe Robbins. Joe Robbins was a legend in the world of coin-operated machines and served as a lead executive with Atari as well as Sega. Mendheim recalls, Joe Robbins and his son Richard Robbins had a huge impact on my career and gave me my start in the industry. Originally, my career of choice was graphic design. Mendheim said, I was illustrating toy packages for Transformers, Voltron, painting car ads, and posters for liquor companies. My company was doing well and I enjoyed that profession. I then started working for Joe and Richard by illustrating a series of game box covers for Sunsoft and Atari. Some of these boxes included Cyberball, Xenophobe, Freedom Force, and Sky Kid, amongst many others. Over time, this transformed into working on character design and level design. The first game I ever worked on as a designer was a game called Fester's Quest, which was developed in Japan and was an Addams Family license. I also illustrated the cover art for that game. Other than having a love for games, I didn't have a clue how to design, and this was my first game design job, but game design came naturally for me. When the game was released, it did surprisingly well, and then my career slowly transitioned from illustrator to game designer. Had it not been for Joe and Richard giving me that first break, I would probably still be doing illustrations for a living. After Mendheim gained some experience, he angled to get a different game off the ground, something of a passion project that would ultimately become the pinnacle of his career. Mendheim notes, I've always loved football and monsters. My favorite team is the Chicago Bears, also known as the Monsters of the Midway. Football and monsters. That's a game I wanted to play. Only one problem, it didn't exist, so it had to be created. Mendheim pitched his football and monsters idea to a friend who worked at Electronic Arts. That friend was Richard Robbins, the aforementioned son of Joe Robbins. Richard was so intrigued by the idea that he facilitated a meeting with Mendheim executives at Electronic Arts so that they could discuss the game. EA founder and at the time CEO Trip Hawkins also took part in the meeting. Mendheim spent a couple weeks getting his presentation together, flew out to EA's headquarters, and everybody liked the idea enough to approve the project with a decent budget. The rest is history. Mutant League Football would go on to become quite popular among gamers of the time with very positive critical reviews, spawning a spin-off called Mutant League Hockey, as well as a cartoon called Mutant League, which ran from 1994 to 1996.
You're going down, Bones!
Bring on the noise. This is it, guys. Hut! 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 Go Rays!
What a move by Razor! Fucking Bones hit him? There's that famous Bones Justice stiff-arm. Lasky didn't have a chance. Goodbye, head. But hold on, don't count Lasky out yet. His head game has been good all day. Bones gets the pass off, but it's high. Too high. What a play! Bones Justice, the Razor Kid, for the winning touchdown!
In 2013, Michael Mendheim set up a Kickstarter campaign to create a modernized version of the game called Mutant Football League. Although the campaign was not as successful as Mendheim would have hoped, this reimagined version of his Football Monsters game would eventually get a release on modern game consoles in 2017 and 2018.
MFL delivers truly distinctive play experiences on every single field, which are filled with diabolical traps and hazards. Oh! That's what you call getting your morning buzz on.
As for the original Mutant League Football and how it holds up today since its 1993 release, well, I gotta say, it's still awesome. Although I didn't own a Sega Genesis myself, my cousin had one and I remember playing this a lot in two-player mode over at his house. There was just something unique and memorable about being able to run crazy plays like Kill Ref or having your players go sliding off the side of an asteroid. The graphics are maybe not the best that you would expect from a 16-bit game. They're not bad, and the player sprites feature some very detailed artwork that's well done, but the post-apocalyptic playing surfaces make for some muddy, dreary, smeared up looking screens that aren't always pretty to look at. It's certainly not a deal breaker or anything, but don't expect to see any sort of beautiful 16-bit rendered color palettes here. But otherwise, the game still plays quite well, even by today's standards. There are enough screwball on-field shenanigans and humor to keep you invested, while the play control is solid enough to make the game fun to play without being annoying at all. My only other minor gripe would probably be the passing scheme. On passing plays, you press C to bring up the passing options. Instead of zooming back and showing you the entire field, you get these little windows at the top of the screen where it shows your receivers. They could be anywhere on field, and these tiny windows don't really give you an accurate viewpoint as to who is open and who is covered. It's sort of luck of the draw here, and you may end up throwing to what seems like an open receiver, only to find that he was actually triple teamed. It's just how these early football games were sometimes. Overall though, Mutant League Football is still very much a fun game to play, whether alone or with friends, and I definitely feel like it still merits attention. At a loose price of around $20 or so on the open market, it's still very much attainable even for the casual collector if you're looking to play on original hardware. It's a unique and important piece of gaming history that hopefully reminds us video games aren't always supposed to be all hyper-realistic and serious. They're just supposed to be entertaining and fun, a healthy diversion to be enjoyed with friends and family. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please don't text and drive, and I'll see you next time on Friday Night Arcade.